Hello there, coming to you live from the capital Jakarta, Indonesia. You are watching Special Report here on TVR World. For the next hour, we are bringing you the coverage of Indonesian President Prabowo Subianto, who is set to take to the podium and address the 28th St. Petersburg's International Economic Forum taking place as we speak right now in St. Petersburg, Russia. We'll bring you live pictures from the venue as well as conversations here in the studio. I'm Rahmat Idris. This is Special Report. And the 28th St. Petersburg's International Economic Forum is indeed a prestigious event with participations of not less than 150 countries from around the globe, including Indonesia, and seeing participations of tens of dozens delegates from around the globe. And the presence of Indonesia at this prestigious forum is indeed one to elevate Indonesia's stance in global world, global stage, and more importantly, global economy. And President Prabowo Subianto of Indonesia has arrived in St. Petersburg yesterday. And also this is in invitations at personal invite from presidents of Russian Federations, Vladimir Putin, which says a lot to this particular bilateral agenda. There's a lot on the sidelines. Today, the president of Indonesia is set to meet in bilateral meeting with presidents of the Russian Federations, Vladimir Putin, talking a lot of things on the table that has been conveyed to the media. And more importantly, the highlight of today, the president of Indonesia, Prabowo Subianto, taking to the podium of the SPF 2025, and that's St. Petersburg's International Economic Forum, to unveil all the attractions, all the investment opportunities from Indonesia. We are going to deep dive into this topic while waiting for live visuals from St. Petersburg. I am joined virtually by two guests throughout the program who will pick their brains on what's the current landscape of Indonesia's relations with Russia. Joining me from Jakarta, Indonesia is the professor of international politics from Universitas Pelita Harapan Jakarta, Professor Alexius Jemadu. Prof. Jemadu, a very good afternoon for you, Jakarta time. Thank you very much for joining us for today's program.
Good afternoon, Rahman.
And on the other side of the screen there, we also join all the way from Surabaya city of East Java, lecturer of international relations of Universitas Erlangga Surabaya, Radityo Dharmaputra. Radit, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Rahmat.
Right. Thank you both, gentlemen. We are waiting for live pictures coming in from St. Petersburg. It's been reported that the bilateral meeting of President Prabowo Subianto and also the presidents of Russian Federation, Vladimir Putin, will take place at the Konstantin Palace in St. Petersburg. A lot of eyes are waiting for the meetings to unfold, and more importantly, the address that our president is going to make at the International Economic Forum. And on that note, before we talk about the forum per se, I'd like to go over to you first, Professor Jemadu, on the current landscape of bilateral and diplomatic relations between Indonesia and Russia. This February 2025 marked 75 years of our relations. Give us a sense of where we are right now, Professor.
I think the attendance of this important forum led by Russia, by President Prabowo, is quite significant as far as our bilateral relations with Russia is concerned. Because you see that at the moment Indonesia needs, diversification of its trade and investment opportunities. Not only limited to our market in the Western countries led by the United States, but we need also to expand our trade access to what we call non-traditional market. So you see, this PF is an important alternative forum for us to see how can we mobilize all international resources for our economic development. And with this target of 8% by President Prabowo, I think it is a good step for us to see new opportunities in the new market of these countries that attend this very important forum.
Well said there. And Randit, I said this at the beginning that this is a very important milestone for Indonesia's president to be at this prestigious forum. Give us a take, Randit, on 75 years of Indonesia and Russia and how much of a significance Russia is as an ally, as a trading partners to our country.
Yeah, I think it's been said that 75 years is a long time,
Yeah.
and this year I think there has been a lot of events made by both Russia and Indonesia, the counterparts, several visits from Russian uh, officials coming to Indonesia, also from Indonesian officials went to Russia. Uh, Minister of Defense Shafri Samsudin, for example, went for the Victory Day parade in Moscow. So it is for Indonesia and for Russia, it's an important partnership. Uh, there are, of course, still concerns that it is not as high as it could be. So there, as Professor Alexis Dimadu mentioned before, it can still be pushed forwards, right? Indonesia needs more partners, um, not only the West, not only China, not only Russia, but other partners. But Russia is there. And based on the president's visit, I think it's clear that the Indonesian government really wants to push it forward, to push it into a better place. But the question is whether this forum now can actually bring what Indonesia wants. And that is a big question. I'm looking forward to hear what President Prabowo will say in this forum because it will probably highlight some of the conflicting messages that I've read. Because at the same time, Prabowo skipped the G7 meeting, the invitation from G7, right? So he would need to justify it by at least bringing something from Russia. So this is what we are looking forward in this speech and also in this meeting between Prabowo and Putin.
Right. Well, skipping G7 is something else entirely. I'd like to get your insights on that. But before you go there, I'd like to go back to Professor Jamadu. Prof, you mentioned briefly that this is also in part of what has become such a main and grand objective of President Subianto Prabowo, which has been conveyed to the public from his campaign during time as president-elect, and now he is the president of Indonesia, the 8% economic growth, at least by the end of his administration. How do you think he'd go about through this SPF 2025 to bring in all of these potential investments and sort of make progress towards that big grand goal of the elusive 8% growth?
Yeah, Rahmat, if you look at the statistics of our trade with BRICS, in which you have also Russia, China, Brazil, and South Africa, you will see that our trade with Russia is only about 5%, other than China and India. So most of our trade with BRICS, you see that there is some overlapping between BRICS and this SPF, you see that our trade is very low. It ought to be more than that, considering our potentialities and considering also the fact that we have a lot of economic sectors in which we can cooperate with Russia. So this is really a challenge for us how to use this momentum of President Prabowo's presence at this forum to increase what we need to do in order to achieve our economic priorities at home. At least to mobilize the resources, trade and investment from Russia in order to increase our market access to this non-traditional market. That is the challenge. I believe that President Prabowo is going to highlight the importance of our trade cooperation with Russia and to see how we can increase our access to this huge market in Russia.
Right. Well, on that note of market access, Prof. Jamadu, last year we had the opportunity to visit Moscow and had a conversation with a lot of industries, including the expectations for Indonesia to take part in the halal industry. That is something growing in the
Yeah.
region, in Europe, for example. It has been said many times over that Indonesia can make a significant contribution in this. What's the next homework for Indonesia to have a slice of the pie, if you will, in this particular project?
Mm. Yeah, you make a very good point, and this is exactly the field where we are weak, and we haven't used this opportunity to increase our potentialities. Yeah, but here we need to emphasize the importance of synergy between the government and the private sector. Considering our demographic background, I think we have a lot of opportunities to strengthen this, industry halal, yeah,
Right.
halal industry, and I think the government also has introduced many good policies in order to increase that. But the problem is that our private sector has not really responded in effective way to see how we can use these new opportunities, especially our relations or bilateral trade with Russia.
Right. Randit, we know for sure that the visit of President Prabowo Subianto to St. Petersburg is under personal invite from presidents of Russian Federation, Vladimir Putin, which has been conveyed since April this year, as a matter of fact. In May, he was actually expected to take part at the victory parade of Russia in Moscow, but it didn't happen. But it happened this June, where he is going to uh, set to take to the stage at the SPF 25 and conveying Indonesia's biggest goal, attracting investments. But we know long before that, Indonesia has such a close relations with Russia. Even our founding father Sukarno has its own mark in the cities of Moscow, meaning that we go way, way back. So, what kind of personal take can you give us the analysis on the personal invitations of Russia, taking into note that it was also a continuation of Prabowo's visit back in August 2024 when he was still the then defense minister and president-elect of Indonesia. Radit.
Yeah, I think this is a very important element of President Prabowo's foreign policy, the personal dimension. I think it's been said that before Prabowo visited the UK, every time he visited countries or every time he had a call with foreign government, with foreign leaders, he always mentioned and always highlight this idea of a personal relations. And I think President Putin very cleverly used that argument, inviting Prabowo personally to visit Russia. I think that's an important again. We need to highlight that it's an important element of Prabowo's foreign policy, and I think all the other countries will learn that it is the way to actually to deal with Indonesia, to have a good deal with President Prabowo is by touching his personal aspect, by inviting Prabowo personally, by having by evoking this idea that Russia and Indonesia has been a very long friends, coming back to Sukarno's time, Sukarno's period, uh, Sukarno and Nikita Khrushchev back then under Soviet Union, very good personal relations as well. And by touching upon this issue, I think it's very clear that even in the future, now and in the next few years, it will be very important dimension of Indonesia-Russia relations, this personal relations between Prabowo and Putin. And I think it's the same with other foreign leaders, but not all countries in at the moment are using the same strategy as Russia using by using this kind of personal relations between leaders, and it's very very clever, very very strategic in a way. Uh, so it's the same. Prabowo will also use these personal relations with many other leaders as well. And this time, I think it's Putin. When he visited Russia, it's with Putin. Next time, we don't know whether he would visit. He hasn't visited the U.S. and met President Trump yet at the moment. But there is also one thing that we always listen. Prabowo really likes this relations with strong leaders, with big strong leaders from several governments. The U.S., Russia, China, India. When he went to Turkey as well, it's the same narrative and the same strategy using personal relations with Erdogan. So it is, I think, a very important characteristic of Prabowo's foreign policy.
Right. Well, BRICS is another entity that also has come into pictures when it comes to establishing ties with all of these very important nations. And there above us, if you see, that is the live pictures from the main venue of the 28th St. Petersburg International Economic Forum currently unfolding in St. Petersburg, Russia, where we expect, according to today's rundown, the president of Indonesia is soon to take the mic and deliver his keynote address to all the delegates, to all the 139 countries taking part at the forum. All right, Professor Jamadu, back to you again. So this is the 28th
Right.
St. Petersburg's International Economic Forum by 2025. I mean, we have a lot of economic forums out there. We have the Davos World
Right.
Economic Forum, which is also a very significant forum and platform to make deals. How do you perceive SPF as also a platform for Indonesia to attract investments and economic cooperations opportunities into our country, Professor?
Yeah, I think Indonesia is still committed to its principle of independent and active foreign policy to see how we can balance our economic relations between the West and the East. Yeah, and it's important for President Prabowo to pay attention to the balance of these economic relations with these um, non-traditional market, yeah, which is PF. And you see that we have also a tradition of international leadership in the global south. And it is good that President Prabowo has this opportunity to, to give a keynote address to this forum, to see that Indonesia is increasingly recognized as a prominent country, as prominent economy in the global south, and we have to demonstrate to the world that we have economic potentialities from which other countries can benefit from us. And at the same time, we also try to develop our strategies how we can take advantage of the forum like this. And it is very important for our minister to support what President Prabowo has established in his foreign policy, because the success of our foreign policy does not depend on the president alone. It has to be supported by all his ministers, yeah, to utilize these economic opportunities for the benefit of our economic growth and for trade opportunities, investment opportunities, because you see that the devil is always in the details. Yeah, we cannot be complacent at the macro level, but we are not very effective or efficient at the implementation or operational level. So it's very important for Indonesia to see how we can materialize all these economic opportunities, especially by our ministers, yeah, because they are in the field, they work at the operational level, how to translate President Prabowo's strategies into real policies and to have the real benefit of our very active president in our foreign policy.
Right. Same goes to you, Radit. Give us a sense of the significance of St. Petersburg's International Economic Forum this year. in order for Indonesia to sort of unveil to the world its economic agenda and ways for international communities to take part in the economic growth of Indonesia amidst all of these global uncertainties that every single country in this world is currently facing thanks to the US. Radit. Right.
Yes, sorry. I think I think I have a bit different perspective compared to my good friend Prof. Alexius here.
Okay.
I think the idea of going to St. Petersburg International Economic Forum is an interesting idea. The idea to go there to attract investment and so on. But the problem with the current situation in Russia is that this year's St. Petersburg International Economic Forum cannot even attract that many companies. I've received reports. I think the Financial Times made a very interesting report just a couple of hours ago that among all the allies of Russia or all the friends of Russia that are invited there, I think only Indonesia, who sent the president there with President Prabowo, which actually says something about Indonesia's position.
Yeah.
But at the same time, whether it is an effective strategy to attract investment, that remains to be seen, especially with not many companies attending the economic forum, and
Yeah.
with not many even domestic Russian companies. I received, I mean, reading at the report, it's also said that I think the chairman of Gazprom was not there. So it is a problem if the idea is for Indonesia to attract investment.
Mm.
But if the idea is for Indonesia to then show its friendship with Russia, uh, then probably again with personal invitation from Putin, it's you know it's a it shows that Indonesia is a good friend of Russia, yes, but in terms of attracting investment, it remains to be seen. At the same time, again, we know that with the war in Ukraine, uh, Russian economy is still in its still having problems, especially with the war economy going on, focusing on domestic issues, domestic mobilizations, and domestic industry supporting the war. So I don't know whether Russia can actually invest in Indonesia. I know that there are a lot of promises, especially with the a lot of delegation coming from Russia to Indonesia this year. But the question now whether that all those promises will come into fruition, especially with internal problems in Russia, with the war still going on,
Yeah.
with the price of oil fluctuating. So now the challenge is for Indonesia to actually gain something. As I mentioned in the beginning, the question is for Indonesia and for President Prabowo to actually show that Indonesia can gain something. The cost for Indonesia of attending, especially in terms of image, as I mentioned again before, rejecting the invitation to G7, choosing to go to Russia is a big risk. Now Indonesia has to show that Indonesia can gain something from these events. Otherwise, people will then say, "Oh, the risk is even bigger than what we expect that to happen to gain from the visit." So I think that's my point on that.
Right. Well, having taken into account the lack of notable world leaders at the SPF 2025 and maybe important CEOs, as you mentioned also, Radit, and skipping G7 on the side, what does that say about diplomacy strategy of Indonesia and ways to establish cooperation? We know that we've received words from Indonesian presidential secretary saying that it's all about overlapping agendas. We have planned president to take part at the leaders retreat in Singapore, which is also coinciding with the G7 agenda in Canada. Traditionally, our president would be there as an observer, but that was skipped this year, and be here in Russia instead for this very ambiguous, if you see it that way, opportunities for us to really attract investment opportunities. Radit, has that been wise on our part?
I mean, I think we cannot evaluate that now
Okay.
because we need to listen to what President Prabowo will say
Yeah.
in his speech. Also, we need to evaluate what we gain after. And what we gain is not only in terms of investment, right? We can also gain allies, we can also gain reputations. Now the question would be whether it outweigh the risk of skipping some other meetings, especially with the CEOs of uh, several CEOs are missing. But yeah, so I think still we cannot evaluate that at the moment. We need to wait. We need to see whether this will will move towards a more investment, as Professor Alexius mentioned, from Russia to Indonesia. If that could happen, in terms of investment, then we gain something. Uh,
Mm.
so it will be beneficial for Indonesia. But
All right.
again, as I said before, we cannot evaluate that now. We need to wait, especially wait first for what Prabowo will say, because the president will have a speech, and we can see from that speech what his positions on many things, on attending these events, what he wants to gain, and after that we need to see, especially in this year, whether all the promises, whether all the opportunities that are being promised by the Russian counterparts by going to Russia will then uh, actually happen in Indonesia, whether it can actually move investment from Russia to Indonesia, or maybe then Indonesia can enter the Russian markets even more than what happened now. I think Professor Alexius mentioned in the beginning that our trade relations with Russia, compared to other big countries, compared to China, to the US, to Japan, even to the European Union, is still lower. So we need to push that further if we want to diversify. And I agree with that. Now it remains the question whether we can actually succeed in pushing all this investment coming to Indonesia. And not to mention that Russia also needs investment from Indonesia.
Yeah.
They also need money from Indonesia. So that's also probably one of our opportunities to invest in Russia as well. That would be a beneficial for both countries. So we need to see at the end whether it brings something to us. I think that's uh, my point on that.
Right, so market diversification, that's probably one of the main objectives of our president's presence over at the SPF 2025. On that note, I'd like to go back to you, Professor Jumedo, because you mentioned that
Yeah.
on the note of market diversification, as mentioned by Radit,
Yeah.
you mentioned that we need to tap into all of these non-traditional markets that are available,
Right.
that are probably present at SPF
Yeah.
2025. How important are these non-traditional markets as opposed to the already existing traditional markets that we have penetrated so far, but thus far has been stirred by the possibility of still on pause tariff trades on behalf of the U.S., Professor?
Yeah, Rahmat, you see that assuming that the participants of this forum, SPF and BRICS, overlaps in many ways, you see, and you look at the statistics of our trade with BRICS is about 30 to 34%
Mm,
of our total trade, yeah,
right.
volume of trade. And our trade with G7 is only about 25 to 30%. So I think it is a good decision on the part of President Prabowo to um, draw our attention to these new opportunities in SPIF. But yes, I agree with my colleague Radit that we haven't really utilized these opportunities.
Mm,
So let us see this visit to Russia as a momentum, yeah, to maximize our benefits from this new market. Because the if we take the totality of this trade with these BRICS or SPF participants, you will see that it constitutes the majority of our trade. But the problem is that we haven't really utilized it. And I think Radit made a very good point in the beginning of our conversation that unfortunately our private sector do not really participate and do not really see the opportunities that are there, yeah, to expand our non-traditional market. You see that under these circumstances of uncertainty, unpredictability of geopolitics, it is always important to, to diversify our trade opportunities, not to stick to our traditional market, but try to study the new opportunities in the new markets. And I see this visit to Russia as a momentum in order to remind us that we have a lot of things to do at home, yeah, in order to encourage our private sector, how to expand our market opportunities in the new market of these global south countries, yeah. So that is the, I think, the strategic importance of this visit to Russia.
Right. Are you also saying, Professor, that the presence of our presidents and all of these Global South economic communities in this PF 2025 is one way or the other to start the project of de-dollarization? Is that even on the table, in your opinion?
Maybe it's not, it is too far to go that direction at the moment, because
Okay.
in the beginning we also agree that we still need to keep the balance, right?
Yeah.
But having said that, it is still important to increase where the opportunities lie, and that is exactly the homework that the government and the private sector need to work together in order to utilize these new opportunities. It's always, things always good at the, at the general or abstract level. The problem is that at the implementation of it, and that's why I think we need to highlight and to emphasize the point that Radityo has emphasized in the beginning, that the participation of the private sector is still very low. Yeah, I mean, the government is more active, but it's not followed by our private sector, and that's why we need to emphasize their synergy, cooperation. Yeah, and this is the new strategy in the whole structure of our economic diplomacy, because without mobilizing international resources, I don't think that we can achieve this target of 8% of growth, yeah, like what President Prabowo has said.
Right. So we need to bring in money from different parts of the globe, including the non-traditional markets, if that's at all feasible, right, Professor? Radit, I'd like to
Yeah.
go over to you again. Now, some of the official words that have come from the presidential media team is that the presence of President Prabowo Subianto at St. Petersburg's Economic Forum is to showcase Indonesia's political stability and also economic prospect. And this is something that I quote from their releases. How do you say that these sets precedents and invite attractions to what presumably is potential to grow from Indonesia's presence in these markets? And what can we safely assume from what President Prabowo will bring on to the table during his visit there?
I think it's very clear. It's not only. I think it's a very consistent message from the Indonesian government, not only from President Prabowo, but even before under President Jokowi,
Yeah.
that the message is always about Indonesia's stability, the potential for investment in Indonesia. So I think it will be the same message from President Prabowo. Again, with all the program, as Professor Alexis mentioned in the beginning, all the programs, all the targets that President Prabowo has set, Indonesia needs a lot of investment, a lot of money coming from different partners.
Yeah.
Again, it's just unfortunate from my point of view again, I've tried to see the report here that at least two of the two biggest state-owned energy company in Russia, both Rosneft and Gazprom, their CEO Igor Sechin and Alexei Miller did not uh, will not appear in the forum. So that's one I think one problem, one big role for Indonesia if we really want to invest. But I think whatever happened, the message from President Prabowo will remain the same. Whether Indonesia is ready to attract investment from Russia, from other countries joining there. I saw that former Brazilian President Dilma Rousseff was also there in the screen before. So there are a lot of even if it was not the highest ranking officer, there are officers from as Professor Aloysius mentioned, BRICS and others. And now the problem would be, and I agree here with Professor Alexius, is that we have all those opportunities. President Prabowo has his positions on, selling the selling point of Indonesia being a stable country and so on, amidst all this global chaos and conflict, right? Now the question will be whether we can actually implement, whether we can actually bring that money. And for that, we need, as Professor Aloysius mentioned, we need private sectors. And this kind of synergy is very crucial. And I'm curious whether there are any other in the Indonesian delegation, whether there are the representative from private sector. This is what I'm curious whether they actually join the Indonesian delegation in St. Petersburg at the moment. But regarding the message, I think it will be the same. President Prabowo will focus on attracting investment and attracting investment by showing that Indonesia is now one of the most stable country. Whether that is, you know, especially looking at the current situation in Indonesia, that would be another discussion. But I think the message, especially to people in the forum, will be the same, and hopefully it will attract something, attract at least, if not Russia, then other countries, as Professor mentioned, from BRICS. Brazil are there, China are there as well. And again, we are too dependent to some extent on China. The figure that Professor Alexis mentioned, 30 something percent, I bet it's mostly come from China.
Yeah.
And so we need to diversify it with others. We have Brazil, we have probably India there as well, we have South Africa, we have other partners from BRICS. The problem now is to attract all the other partners. So this forum, even if the Russian side, they're missing several CEOs, the other partners there might be more beneficial to Indonesia. So that might be the target here for the president and the team and the private sector that might accompany them there.
Right, very well said there,
Okay.
Randit.
Rahmat, may
Please,
I add
Professor.
something to that to have a comparative dimension of it? I have the data here from the government that our trade with Russia is only 1.3 billion. So if you compare it with Vietnam, they have 2.4 billion, almost twice. Yeah? You see that we haven't done our homework here, in Indonesia. And with China, we are almost 60 billion. You see, 1 billion only with Russia. So it's very, very low. It shows there are a lot of things that we need to do in order to materialize what we need to accomplish in this visit.
Right, that is a huge discrepancy there from just merely
That's true,
one point
yes.
something billions to over 60 billions. Well, China has always been one of the largest trading partners to Indonesia for
That's true,
decades
yes.
now, and that probably that needs changing in the near future. In the meantime, what's even
Yeah,
more important now, gentlemen, is for us to listen in to what President Prabowo Subianto has had to say later on during
right.
his time at the St. Petersburg's International Economic Forum, which we believe will take place in just a few moments from now. In the meantime, we'll take a quick break right here for the special report. We'll be right back. Stay with us here on TV Our World. And you're still watching special reports here on TVRI World, coming to live from capital Jakarta, Indonesia. And we are set to bring in live visuals from St. Petersburg, Russia, where moments from now, Indonesian President Prabowo Subianto is scheduled to address all the hundreds and thousands of delegates on the potential opportunities to invest and to establish economic cooperations with Indonesia. That's moments from now. In the meantime, let's go over with our guests here on the program. And still joining me for today's conversations, before we bring in more pictures from St. Petersburg, from Surabaya, Universitas Erlangga, Lecturer of International Relations, Radityo Dharma Putra, and also Professor Alexius Jemadu from the Universitas Pelita Harapan, Jakarta. Radit and Prof. Jemadu, I hope you're still with us. We are still waiting for moments for those visuals where our presidents will take to the stage and deliver the remarks. In the meantime, that elusive visuals is still without certainty as we speak right now, and we wait for more coming in from St. Petersburg. In the meantime, I'd like to go back to you, Professor Jemadu, because that was an interesting fact you mentioned, the disparity of investment value, trade values between Russia and a lot of these other trading partners of Indonesia. The discrepancy of tens of billions of dollars in the past years alone. So why do you think that has been the case when it comes to our trade balance with Russia? Is it the sheer geographical distance with our Eastern European countries, or are there elements or other factors playing into essentially the numbers of these economic trade, Professor?
Yeah, I think it's a very interesting question because it draws our attention to the fact that for so long we focus too much on our traditional market, with the effect that we neglect other opportunities that we can also explore. So that is exactly the reason why we have to raise this issue in order to draw the attention of the government and also our private sector. So you see that in international relations, it's always the art of utilizing opportunities, because if you don't use those opportunities, other countries will will
Snatch them, yeah.
treat you as an object of their own advantage.
All right.
And so, as a sovereign country, we need to tell ourselves, tell our government, our private sector, international relations is the art of utilizing opportunities for your national interest. So if we don't really perform in our trade relations with other countries, they will use our markets, and they will use our economic resources for their own benefit. So here we need to really keep the balance, in our trade relations. So your question is very good thing, I think.
All right.
Yeah.
Radit, over to you, because some of the main selling points of international economic forums in St. Petersburg this year is reflecting from last year's success, which they claimed was attended by over 21,000 delegates and 139 countries. And more importantly, the presence of world leaders and global economic stakeholders, and the outcomes of trillions of rupiahs and thousands of deal. What do you make of this when it comes to this year's International Economic Forum, where we need to put into account the lack of trade balance between us and Russia alone, for example? Radit.
Yeah, I agree with Professor Alexius. I think it is very important for us to first of all reiterate what we want. I think that's the key message from Professor Alexius. What is our national interest here? What is what is it that we want? If we want Russia to invest in which sectors, right? And then we went to Russia, we asked them to invest there. Uh, the problem now is, I think, we you know we got distracted by all these numbers. The, to this international economic forum, we got all these hundreds of delegates, hundreds of world leaders, on. Yeah. But what matters most is that what we get from that, right? What is our interest? And I think we need to underline with President Prabowo's focus on, for example, increasing our economy 8%, all this economic growth, all those projects inside Indonesia. We need all those projects coordinated by Daratara. We need all those investors. Russia has been, to some extent, unreliable partner in this kind of investment. They invest in Kalimantan for the railways, went sideways, and we never heard about it again, right? Now this cooperation with Rosneft and Pertamina in Tuban, for example, again, we didn't hear again what happened after that, whether we actually get a lot of money from that point. So now I think we need, President Prabowo and the team really need to underline, especially in the speech that we are again looking forward to here, what is our main goals coming to St. Petersburg. This is not a forum for just, shaking hands with President Putin. President Prabowo can do it even before that in the other forum. The Victory Day forum would be even better for a symbolic purposes. This is an economic forum that he needs to bring something concrete. Not only promise, not only that there are promises that they will invest somewhere. No, real investment in which sectors. I think that's what we are looking for, and this is the challenge now. Whether this could be done in this year. SPIEF, because again, as I mentioned before, reports coming from inside the forum said that there are a lot of missing CEOs, for example.
All right, I have to pause you there, Mas Radit, because we are looking at the live pictures of the arrival of Indonesians contingent and entourage. We believe the presidential car of President Prabowo Subianto with Indonesia's flag, there he is, has exited the car and made his way into the main venue of St. Petersburg International Economic Forum 2025. The President of Indonesia, Prabowo Subianto, is scheduled to take to the stage today to speak at the forum. But then again, the latest update is that there's actually a picture of our president on his way to one of the more important agenda of his visit over in St. Petersburg, which is on the sideline of the forum, having the bilateral meeting with President Vladimir Putin. Right. In the past 2 years, they have met twice. In August 2024, he was still then the defense minister of Indonesia, but already the elect president of Indonesia, not yet inaugurated, but now he is there in his capacity as the president of Indonesia. Over to you, Professor Alexius, because by then, in 2024, some of the main objectives that have been unveiled to the media, to the press, was that of course, something touching on the defense cooperations, but also agriculture and technology and education. That was also on the table for these two leaders. Do you think that these next encounters of President Prabowo and President Vladimir Putin is also a follow-up to the meeting that they had a year ago, Professor?
Yeah, I think they are going to materialize what they have promised in their previous meeting. But don't forget also the fact that Russia also need Indonesia in many ways, because of all these economic sanctions by the West, and I believe that Putin is in a very difficult situation to maintain the economic stability of his country. But having said that, still our agenda is to study the opportunities that we can utilize from our economic relations with Russia, because that is exactly the reason why there is a tendency that our foreign policy leaning more towards these BRICS and all this discourse on global South. And I think it is for a good reason. But then we have to also pay attention to our capacity to translate all this into real outcome for our trade and for our investment, for our tourism, all those economic sectors that we need to maximize the opportunities for the benefit of our country. So I believe that in this visit, President Prabowo and President Putin are going to materialize and to put this into reality, what they need to expand in their economic relations between the two countries. Because these are two huge economies in the BRICS, right?
All right, okay,
And
I have
they
to
have
pause
all
you
the
there, Professor.
potentialities.
Okay, apologies, I have to pause you there. We are having live pictures from our media partner Viori right now, where the bilateral meeting between the presidents of Russian Federation, Vladimir Putin, where you're looking at the pictures right now, live from the Konstantin Palace in St. Petersburg, seated with the president of Indonesia, Prabowo Subianto. Obviously, the two leaders are now conversing, and they are making their way into the bilateral meeting, one of the more pressing agenda of President Prabowo's state visit to Russia from the 19th to the 20th of June 2025. We are waiting for moments if we can have audio from the program. Let's have a listen in.
Bapak Presiden akan sebagai tamu utama di sana.
Это хорошая площадка, которая функционирует в течение уже многих лет и собирает достаточно большое количество предпринимателей и политиков со всего мира.
Itu platform yang sangat bagus dan efektif dan setiap tahun menggabung berbagai-bagai pengusaha, pakar dan politikus.
Наши отношения развиваются поступательно с Индонезией.
Hubungan Rusia dan Indonesia berkembang secara konsisten.
Товарооборот растет.
Volume perdagangan naik.
У нас есть хорошие перспективы по целому ряду приоритетных и очень интересных направлений взаимодействия.
Kami ada banyak perspektif di berbagai-bagai bidang.
Это и сельское хозяйство, и космос, и энергетика.
Termasuk pertanian, penjelajahan luar angkasa dan energi.
Это взаимодействие в области военно-технического сотрудничества.
Kerjasama di bidang militer dan teknis.
У нас большой объем и причем растущий объем взаимодействия.
Kami ada banyak peluang untuk kerjasama dan kami masih ada banyak peluang dan kapasitas untuk berkembang.
Индонезия стала полноправным членом БРИКС.
Indonesia menjadi anggota penuh di BRICS.
И мы очень рассчитываем, даже я уверен в том, что Индонезия внесет свой существенный вклад в развитие и работу этой организации, которая приобретает все больше и больше вес в международных делах.
Dan harapan saya bahwa Indonesia akan memberikan sumbangan besar dalam kegiatan organisasi ini.
Мы очень рады видеть вас, уважаемый господин президент.
Kami sangat senang bertemu bersama Bapak di sini.
Добро пожаловать.
Selamat datang.
Terima kasih.
Большое спасибо.
Yang Mulia Presiden Putin, saya ingin menyampaikan terima kasih saya, penghargaan saya atas undangan ini hari ini dan penerimaan yang begitu baik diberikan kepada saya dan delegasi saya.
Уважаемый господин президент, в первую очередь хотел бы выразить искреннюю благодарность и глубокую признательность от имени всей нашей делегации за организацию визита, а также за оказанный нам теплый прием.
Saya juga terima kasih sekali lagi. Sebelum saya dilantik, saya sudah diterima tahun lalu dan ini adalah kunjungan resmi saya sebagai Presiden Republik Indonesia.
Также я благодарю вас за организованную ранее встречу до момента моего официального вступления в должность президента Республики Индонезии и очень рад, что сейчас появилась возможность провести мой первый официальный визит в статусе президента Республики Индонезии.
Juga terima kasih pelantikan saya, Bapak Presiden mengirim utusan senior untuk menghadiri pelantikan saya.
Также благодарю вас за направление высокопоставленного представителя, который принял участие в моей инаугурации.
Juga saya sangat terima kasih Rusia mendukung Indonesia menjadi anggota BRICS penuh dengan waktu yang sangat cepat.
И также, пользуясь случаем, хотел выразить глубокую признательность Российской Федерации за поддержку полноценного вступления Индонезии в БРИКС в такой короткий срок.
Sesungguhnya saya ingin hadir langsung di KTT Kazan, tapi pada saat itu saya baru dilantik 1 hari dan saya harus melantik kabinet saya.
Конечно же, я хотел лично присутствовать на саммите в Казани, но дело в том, что прошел на тот момент всего лишь 1 день с момента моей инаугурации, и я должен был руководить новыми назначениями в кабинете министров.
Dan sesudah itu hubungan kita terus meningkat. Pejabat-pejabat senior dari Rusia datang terus. Saya sudah jumpa dengan Wakil Perdana Menteri Mantirov, saya kira sudah tahun ini mungkin sudah di Jakarta sudah 2 kali, di St. Petersburg 1 kali, Menteri Luar Negeri saya sudah 3 kali dalam belum 1 tahun sudah 3 kali ke Rusia. Jadi hubungan kita meningkat terus. Saya mengikuti perkembangan, banyak kemajuan di berbagai bidang. Ekonomi membaik, hubungan ekonomi kita, kerjasama di banyak bidang juga sangat baik, dan perjanjian kita ikut serta dalam Eurasian Free Trade Area juga berjalan dengan sangat baik. Presiden Putin banyak sekali kemajuan dalam hubungan ini dan terima kasih saya diundang sebagai tamu kehormatan di St. Petersburg Economic Forum.
И отношения между двумя странами, безусловно, развиваются крайне активно. В течение прошедшего года, если не ошибаюсь, уже 2 раза встречался с господином Мантуровым в Джакарте, 1 раз в Санкт-Петербурге. Что касается министра иностранных дел Республики Индонезии, то он менее чем за год, примерно за прошедшие 8 месяцев, уже 3 раза посетил Российскую Федерацию. И, безусловно, мы уделяем большое внимание развитию сотрудничества с Российской Федерацией в различных отраслях. В первую очередь речь идет о торгово-экономическом сотрудничестве и о других направлениях, а также заключении двусторонних соглашений. Большое внимание уделяем работе по соглашению о зоне свободной торговли с Евразес. И еще раз, пользуясь случаем, хотел бы поблагодарить вас за любезное приглашение посетить Санкт-Петербургский международный экономический форум в качестве почетного гостя.
Спасибо большое.
Meetings and initial exchanges between the President of Indonesia, Prabowo Subianto, and the President of Russian Federation, Vladimir Putin, taking place at the Constantin Palace in St. Petersburg, where moments from now, the President of Indonesia is also set to deliver his key remarks. Over to you, Professor Alexius Jamadu. A lot of key takeaways there from the short exchange from the two leaders. First, promoting the forum on behalf of Putin. Of course, he's saying a lot of experts, business people are here. It is a potential opportunities for Indonesia to expand its economic cooperations. And he also marveled at the fact that Indonesia and Russia has always had such a consistent relations. Our trade is growing, he said, and other opportunities of cooperations, agriculture, space exploration, energy, I don't know if we're still buying Russian oil, is also flourishing, he said. Your analysis, please.
Yeah, I think the conversation between the two head of states demonstrate how they need each other in the economic field and how they try to demonstrate their commitment to increase these opportunities for the two countries. It is in line with what I have said earlier, is that there are still room for improvement as far as Indonesia is concerned.
Yeah.
And now President Putin has opened the door for Indonesia, and it is up to us how to utilize this opportunity to increase our trade and investment in the fields that President Putin has said. So it is really important for us now to remind our government and our private sector what they need to do in order to utilize these opportunities. Because at the highest level, there is a real commitment between the two presidents how to increase their bilateral relations. And don't forget that Russia also need Indonesia's market. But at the same time, Indonesia can also use the economic scale of Russia, Russia's excellence in the field of defense, in the field of aerospace, and there are a lot of new technologies that we can learn from and take advantage of our bilateral relations with Russia.
All right. Over to you, Randit. What were your key takeaways from the short exchanges that we've witnessed from the two leaders?
Yes, for me, I think it's important to make a disclaimer that this is just the first statement, right?
Yeah.
After this, they will have a longer conversation, of course. But I noticed one thing that President Putin said, that Russia wants Indonesia to be more active and to contribute more in BRICS.
Yes.
I think that is the key, one of the key message, and that is a challenge actually for Indonesia. Do we really want to contribute that much? And do we want to contribute that much, right? So that is a challenge from President Putin, and he invites Indonesia to be more active, to contribute more in the organizations that we join, right? And also one interesting thing is that President Prabowo mentioned very specifically the inauguration ceremony. I think this highlights what I mentioned from the very beginning, the aspect of personal relations. Very important for President Prabowo, also very important for President Putin. So this is one key that will be basically deciding where the Indonesia-Russia relations is going. And I will also agree with Professor Alexius that I think Putin hinted that Russia needs Indonesia here, especially with not that many world leader coming to the forum. Prabowo is basically the highest foreign leaders coming to St. Petersburg. So now it is a sign that Russia needs Indonesia in this case. And by coming there, Indonesia, President Prabowo gives that respect to Russia. So now it's actually because Russia needs Indonesia, now we can actually probably uh, give more or invest more or do more if we really want to do that, to increase the relations between Indonesia and Russia.
Yeah.
Not to put the Russian side as, all that Russia needs to invest in Indonesia, but what Indonesia is contributing to these relations. That's also a big question. And I think that would be the discussion, the personal discussion between the two presidents. And I'm now looking forward to what he will say in the forum, because that would mean, again, if the reports are correct and that President Prabowo is the highest, the only president from foreign countries there, that would mean Indonesia is the highest, right? So Indonesia will have the floor, will have the stage, and President Prabowo will have the stage to actually say something, to show Indonesia's positions, to attract investment to Indonesia, but also to position Indonesia in a global forum. That because Indonesia now is no longer a small player, Indonesia is in more discussion, no longer a middle power. It's increasing its influence. So now we need to see whether Indonesia can play a bigger role in this stage.
Right. You're right when you say that that was just an initial conversation between the two leaders. If we can safely say that it's a prelude to what's going to take place next, which is a conversations, negotiations, and diplomacy efforts behind closed doors where agreements are made and MOUs are presumably signed. We have got a list of those MOUs later on. But one thing that also President Prabowo took time to highlight is the fact that he is grateful to become an honorary invitee for the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum. And you mentioned that rightly so, that we don't know whether other world leaders will also make the same presence and significance being at that particular forum. And the fact that also piggyback or echo what President Putin said was that the expectations of Indonesia for as a full member now to contribute significantly to BRICS. Please bring into light, Professor and also Radit, how exactly Indonesia is expected to make significant contributions to BRICS without irking or being on the bad sides of other trading partners that are opposed to BRICS, the United States, most importantly, for example. Maybe first to you, Radit.
Oh, this is a very difficult question. This is one question that always bothers me now, that whether, because the decision to join BRICS, in terms of symbolism, in terms of status, is probably a good decision. We want that status to be recognized as part of this the elite group of countries there. Yeah. But at the same time, do we really want to contribute more? Do we have the resources to contribute more? And what kind of contribution? If it's an economic contribution, especially with the new development bank, maybe we can then decide we want to help the investment, help global South countries. So maybe that's one thing that we can contribute. But with the internal dynamics in Indonesia, with the pressure from the society, with all the needs of all the projects that the presidents have planned, that could be put aside, right? So maybe there is another way to contribute in BRICS, but I don't know whether Indonesia wants to go that way, because it might signal, as you correctly mentioned, Selamat, is that it might signal to the other countries that Indonesia is siding or getting closer with Russia and China. And with this situation in the world, conflict everywhere, potential conflict are also everywhere. It is a very delicate position. I wonder whether Indonesia would actually take a step back and say, "Oh, we need to assess more on what we should do and what we could do," because otherwise, if we just wondering whether we should be more careful. When President Putin said we need to contribute more, we want Indonesia, Russia wants Indonesia to contribute more. Indonesia has to take a step back and then say, yeah, we need to calculate first what is our interest in contributing more. So it's not only about contributing more, as Professor Alexis mentioned, it is in our interest. What is our interest in contributing more? If it's about status, then fine. But it's about something else, we need to calculate and to talk about it more, discuss about it more. Otherwise, uh, we will be seen, especially if we contribute in a more political way. No, there are a lot of issues in BRICS that could be very sensitive to other countries. And again, we don't want to upset the other partners of Indonesia. We still need the other partners in the United States, the European Union, Australia, Japan, and so on. So we need to keep the balance right, as Professor Alexis mentioned, right? So we need to, I think we need to think about it. I don't have any any immediate answers because it is a very difficult since last year or since even earlier this year. I've been thinking about it, and it is very difficult to see, difficult task to see whether Indonesia can actually contribute something there, other than the new development bank, and try to develop projects in the global south. Probably that is the way forward, less risky, less sensitive in terms of geopolitics. But I wonder whether Prof. Alexius have more better ideas.
Right. Well, share with us your thoughts on this, Professor, because rightly so, President Prabowo also echoed by saying that he is very thankful for the push maybe made by Russia for Indonesia's induction into BRICS, because we remember that the summit in Kazan in Russia took place, if not September, October 2024, and in the span of 4 months, January 2025, Indonesia is a full member.
Yeah, first of all, I think we need to understand first the nature of BRICS as international multilateral forum or cooperation first. Yeah, and in my view, BRICS is a very pragmatic international cooperation. So they are not bound by any common value or common ideological orientation. So it is a very pragmatic. So let us navigate our foreign policy in such a way that as much as we pay attention to the growing importance of BRICS, let us not sacrifice our relations with the West, yeah, with G7, because we still need them, yeah. But having said that, Indonesia, I believe, has a unique position within BRICS, and we have the credential to contribute more in political and diplomatic aspect of this cooperation. And if you compare Indonesia's position with other countries in the BRICS, Indonesia is unique in the sense that uh, Indonesia is relatively more trouble-free, yeah, with its neighbor compared to other BRIC members, you see. And if my assumption is valid, then we have a lot of opportunities to contribute to this cooperation as a bridge builder, yeah, and to emphasize the fact that we are living in a multipolar world, yeah, and we need to resolve all global issues together with other countries. We need to emphasize that, yeah. As much as there is a polarization, between East and West, United States and China, United States and Russia, Indonesia is still in the middle to unite this and to demonstrate our capacity, yeah, as mentioned in the preamble of our constitution, that Indonesia is capable to contribute to world peace and prosperity. I think if Indonesia can play such a role in BRICS or in the global south, it means a lot for our reputation as a peaceful country, as a constructive power, not only in the regions, but also in many multilateral forums. That's, I think, very important for Indonesia to be aware of, yeah, because we have the credential to play important role in BRICS and also in many other international fora as well.
All right, thank you for that, Professor. Do stay with us, though. We're going to take a quick break, and when we're back, we're going to bring you more live pictures from St. Petersburg of the 28th St. Petersburg International Economic Forum here live on Special Report. Don't go anywhere. Thank you so much for staying with us on today's special reports highlighting the 28th St. Petersburg International Economic Forum. Here coming to you live from Jakarta, Indonesia. We are going to bring you soon live pictures from the venue of the forum where the President of Indonesia is scheduled to take to the podium and address the audience. And right now, as we've relayed a few minutes earlier, President Prabowo Subianto is currently in a bilateral meeting with the presidents of Russian Federation, Vladimir Putin. And while we wait for those pictures to come in from St. Petersburg, let's bring in our guest again, joining us for the conversations throughout the programs today. We have with us the Professor of International Politics of Universitas Pelita Harapan Jakarta, Professor Alexius Jemadu, and also joining us from East Java in the city of Surabaya, the lecturer of international relations of Universitas Erlangga Radityo Dharma Putra. Gentlemen, are you still with us on the program? All right. I hope you can hear me clearly. I'd like to first go back to you, Radit, because I'd like to bring up to our attention of the discussions the very interestingly and aptly titled theme of the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum. It is shared values, the foundation of growth in a multipolar world. Your attentions on shared values, meaning commonalities, and multipolar world. Radit, do you think that in a way, this forum is trying to address the geopolitical tensions, the ongoing conflicts, both in Europe and in Middle East as we speak right now?
I mean, it could be interpreted that way, even though I think the participant of the forum would rather interpret it in a more economic way. So shared values in a multipolar world. Yeah, of course. If of course in a geopolitical term, it would mean a lot of things, especially with Russia pushing for this narrative about global South. Indonesia also, as part of the global South, part of the probably one of the leaders of the global South, being invited to the forum is in itself a sign of the policies that Russia is making. I think it's very interesting. But I would like just to refer back to what Professor Alexius mentioned in before, that this is again in a multipolar situation. We have seen that multipolarity doesn't mean it would suddenly become more peaceful, right? We saw what happened in Ukraine, we saw what happened in Gaza, we saw what happened in Iran at the moment. Not to mention other conflicts that are still going on, India and Pakistan a couple of weeks ago. So it is a more dangerous world. And in times of conflict, in times of chaos, I think it's natural that people would look at other, try to diversify relations, try not to be dependent on one partner. And I think Indonesia did that, trying to do that at least by showing up in this forum again, an economic forum, not a geopolitical forum, by default the name at least of the forum. But you see that even at the moment in this kind of multipolar, chaotic world, it is very difficult to separate what is economic and what is geopolitics. We need to understand that everything is connected. And I think it is the idea, especially I think coming from Russia, this idea of the shared values. We need to be very careful in accepting that narrative, right? We need, again, as I mentioned, I just want to repeat and highlight it again. Again, it is also echoes what Professor Alexius mentioned before. We need to have our own stance. We need to have our own, we need to be sure of our own interests and our own capability. Otherwise, we would be used by other countries. There are a lot of poles in kind of multipolar world. There are a lot of poles. There are the US, there are the European countries, there are Russia, China, India, Brazil, other countries. They are trying to use each other. And we need to be aware of that. We need to be aware of our own interests as well, so that we can actually gain something from this kind of forum. And I think it is very interesting that they put shared values in the theme of the forum, because usually economy doesn't care about this idea of shared values. It's about pragmatism, right? Professor Alexis mentioned this. Even BRICS is part of this idea of a pragmatic economic partnership. That not ideological. It's not about values. But it is interesting that Russia puts this idea of shared values in it. And we need to be, again, very careful, because we don't want to get involved in any kind of value-based conflict or ideological divisions or value divisions in the world. We need to be strong in our own interests, which is at the moment, especially under President Prabowo, is increasing our economic growth. So he needs to be focused on that and use this forum to gain that interest first. And then if there are other interests, for example, one of the team that Professor Alcius mentioned, Indonesia as leader of Global South, Indonesia can actually be a peaceful country, push for peace in the world. That is another thing that we need to think about. We need to, if we really want to pursue that, we can. Indonesia, I believe, since long, I've written a lot about this. I believe that Indonesia can be a peaceful player, pushing for peace. But we need to understand the conflict. We need to understand our own capacity first before going there. So do not get distracted by the idea of shared values first, reflected on our own vision first, or our own interest first, before going there. That's, at least for me, that's how I interpret this for the Indonesian perspective.
Right, very, very well put together there. Thank you very much for that, Radit. Professor, enlighten us, please, these two keywords in the central theme of SPF 2025, shared values in a multipolar world. What are these values? Do we really share them in terms of the country's principles of Indonesia? As Radit would put it, we need to navigate carefully when it comes to this, Professor.
Yeah, I believe that the host plays very important role how an international meeting like this is conducted, right? And the fact that those two keywords are emphasized demonstrate how Russia tries to use this forum for its own diplomatic interest and reputation. And in this world where power politics is so dominant, so prevalent everywhere in geopolitical events like in the Middle East, in Europe itself, you see that it is very important for Russia to get as many friends as possible. And that's why it emphasizes the importance of common values. But to be honest, I don't really see that these countries are, bound by any commonality of the values that they believe in. Yeah. And the second key concept here is multipolarity. I think Russia intendedly used that word in order to um, tell the participants that the global politics, global political economy is not only determined by the United States and the West, and also Russia also plays very important role. And you know that historically, Russia has a pride as a huge country in Europe, and it tries to demonstrate, yeah, in this geopolitical tension with the West that Russia can also play a global role, can also organize its own version of World Economic Forum like this SPF, yeah. And Indonesia, I think Radit makes a very important point as far as our foreign policy is concerned, that whatever role we play in international relations, it should always be driven by our own national interest. And don't dance according to the tune that other people determine for you. Okay? And you have to be aware of your own interest and always try to be aware of the fact that in international relations, other countries also try to use you as instrument for their own interest. So we have to emphasize our national interest, and we have to emphasize the sovereignty and the liberality of our foreign policy vis-a-vis our partners, yeah, including here in this case Russia or other great powers. Yeah, we need to really emphasize independence of our own judgment, yeah, based on our national priorities, based on our own core values of our foreign policy, and based on our own national interest.
Right. Professor, in an increasingly polarizing climate that we're in right now, how do you think the importance of Indonesia's role in balancing diplomacy efforts between the Western blocs and the Eastern blocs come into play?
Yeah, you see that the instrument for middle powers and small powers, yeah, in this global politics is always international law and international norms. And Indonesia is always against domination or hegemony, whether it is at the regional level and also at the global level. We don't want to make international relations dictated by hegemony or power politics. And that's why it's important for us to keep balance, to navigate our foreign policy in such a way that we can reach out to any partner in international relations. We don't have problems with Russia. We don't have problems with United States, and we try to navigate this foreign policy on the basis of our own principle of independent and active foreign policy. That is the meaning of this principle. Yeah, how we can reach out to the great powers and to resolve global issues with the spirit of solidarity, not on the basis of power politics, not on the basis of hegemony. Yeah, we don't want to have an international politics that is determined only by the great powers. Yeah, we live together in this community, world community of human beings. Yeah, that is based on equality of our positions, equality as human beings. That is, I think, the core principle, the core value of our foreign policy, and that way Indonesia is capable of contributing a lot, yeah, under all this geopolitical tension in various regions of the world.
Right. I would like also to get your thoughts on the way we can achieve the sweet balance of maintaining diplomacy between the Western and the Eastern Bloc, Radit, and also it would not be an easy undertaking on behalf of our nations. But more on that later when we return. We have to take another quick break right here on Special Report. Do stay with us until then. Welcome back. You are still watching a special report here on TVA World, highlighting the 28th St. Petersburg's International Economic Forum 2025, where President Prabowo Subianto is attending and is currently in St. Petersburg in a bilateral meeting with the presidents of Russian Federations, Vladimir Putin. And while we wait for more pictures coming in from the bilateral meeting between Indonesia and Russia, where the two top leaders are hashing out all the details and signing all the memorandums of understandings, let's join in our guests again for the program today. We are joined by the Professor of International Politics of Universitas Pelita Harapan Jakarta, Alexius Jemadu, and also on the other side, Lecturer of International Relations of Universitas Erlangga from East Java, Surabaya, Radityo Dharmaputra. Thank you very much. Radit and also Professor Alexius, I hope you are still with us while we wait for more final pictures coming in. We have been updated with the latest rundown essentially from St. Petersburg saying that ongoing as we speak right now is the closed meeting between President Prabowo Subianto and the presidents of Russian Federations, Vladimir Putin, alongside their respective entourage, meaning that we are waiting for the final words. Usually, in line with the traditions after these tete-a-tete meeting, each top leaders will convey the final results of the diplomacy, of the negotiations, and all the things that have been signed, that have been agreed between the two countries. So that is something that is on the table right now, and we cannot tell just how soon or how late they are going to conclude these indoor encounters. In the meantime, the latest update also that President Prabowo Subianto will be addressing the 28th St. Petersburg International Economic Forum tomorrow on the 20th of June 2025. So by today, we will not be expecting the official keynote address on behalf of Indonesian government at the forum, but that's going to happen tomorrow, and more things to dissect, of course, once the keynote address has been delivered. In the meantime, let's play it by ear, gentlemen, at this point, as we wait for the final conclusion of the bilateral meeting between Indonesia and Russia, currently happening right now as we speak at the Palace of Konstantinovsky in St. Petersburg. Over to you now, Radityo, because it was a postponed question before we took a break, which is walk us through the most ideal mechanism and approach of the government of Indonesia, treading the water, navigating carefully, and achieving the sweet balance of diplomacy efforts between the Western and the Eastern blocs.
Yes. I'm not really fond of this idea, I mean, of balancing the East and West, because I think, again, repeating my point from before, we need to be aware of our own interest first. So maybe our interest lies in deciding that we need to get closer with one. I don't mind. That's what Hatta always suggested from the very beginning. We can basically switch positions as long as it fits our national interests. But if the argument is that, especially under this multipolarity, under this chaos in the world, we need to be able to keep the distance. This is basically our this idea of Indonesia keeping distance from everyone, making balance between the East and West. I think one of the easiest or one of the way forward is for Indonesia to be present in any kind of again multilateral arrangement. For example, either it is by the West, so-called West, or by the so-called East. So if we are invited, for
Yep.
example, we are invited to another G7 meeting as an observer. At the same time, we're invited to Russia or China. Then we must do everything. We do all of them. If we cannot do one, then we don't do all the others, because otherwise we'll be seen as, having given one our priority than the other. So maybe
Right.
that's one thing. But as Professor Alexis mentioned before, the power of a middle, the tools of middle power is not only international norms and law, but also a multilateral forum. So using multilateral forum as the UN, the biggest multilateral forum, right?
Yeah.
APEC in Asia Pacific, uh, G20, using a forum where all sides are present and push the narrative of peace, push the cooperation there, I think is the way that Indonesia can, without being, overly siding with one side.
Mm.
Again, joining BRICS is one thing. Uh, People used to conflate BRICS and OECD, two different organizations with two different functions. But BRICS is, as Professor Alexis mentioned, I think it's very close to what G7 actually do in terms of having discussion, having to decide something. So if we compare BRICS and G7 and try to balance both, then we need to be present in both. I
Right.
think that's what from the very beginning, when whatever the reason is, whether it's a scheduling conflict with the Singapore leaders retreat, uh, we need to be able the next years or the next in the future, we need to be able to manage that very delicately, both engaging with both G7 and BRICS,
Right.
because we are part of BRICS now. We still want to be part of the so-called, having a good cooperation with the West. We need to be able to deal and engage with G7. OECD is a completely different thing because it's a different organization, and we are going to get in or trying to get in anyway. So we are trying to get in uh, all multilateral forums, all multilateral discussions, which is good. But for that, we need also,
Yeah.
and this is going to relate with the point that probably President Prabowo needs also to look at the priorities of foreign policy, because all the fundings, all the resources for our diplomats to do all this, to keep the balance, is limited. And it's even more limited because we switch the funds to some other places, right? So we need to be able to bring more funds to the diplomats to be able to present in many other international forums to show that Indonesia cares not only with the West, not only with the East, with the South, with other partners as well. So being present, basically, in this case, I think.
Right. Well, the accession of Indonesia into OECD memberships, all of its trials and tribulations is another beast to talk about. But we'll tackle that for another time, for another discussion. So I'd like to bring up the fact that concurring with what you just said there, Radityo, was the fact that we need to give this to the idea of, I mean, it is assumed that the skipping of the G7 summit in Canada, aside from the overlapping scheduled with the leaders' retreat in Singapore, as mentioned by the presidential palace of Indonesia, but also under the consideration that in just a few meetings, these leaders of the G7, who are automatically within the G20, will be meeting anyway in a couple of months, maybe on behalf of Indonesia's considerations. And it's not going to be South Africa, even though it is under the presidency of South Africa this year. But the final summit at the end of the year, this year, will be held. We've heard from an ambassador here, moved outside of South Africa, but rather in Ethiopia, meaning that the G20 summit this year will represent the importance of not just South Africa, but an entire continent of Africa. I mean, we're not even putting into account the dispute that Trump is currently having with South Africa and its presidents, with a lot of conflicts and everything that the region has been embroiled in. But taking that into consideration, do you think that all of the maneuvers that Indonesia has taken, Raditya, has been for the sake of Indonesia's stance to have a win-win solution? This is something that we've always been put forward since Indonesia's presidency back in G20 2022, where all countries prosper, not in a way that leaving anybody behind. We can all prosper together, and meaning that we have to take a good portions of our contributions for the Westerns and the Eastern blocs and all the other non-traditional parts of our cooperations. Your thoughts?
Yes, so this is what worries me, because at the same time we need to be able, again, just to reiterate the point, we need to be able to clarify our own interests first. And if our interest, however high it seems to be, is for all countries to, you know, in a win-win situation, all move together, I would be a bit skeptical, because we don't know what the other side,
Yeah, it's
what
not
other
as easy as
countries
it
think about
sounds,
it,
right?
So it is a very difficult. It is a very difficult
Okay.
situation for Indonesia. But at the same time, I think you are correct in saying that G20 is very important. I would even argue that there is one missing event we completely miss that we can actually use for it, which is this year's 70th anniversary of the Asia Africa Conference, which we did not use for our own diplomacy.
Yeah.
That is one of the missing piece of our foreign policy. But without that, then we can use the G20. And if the G20 is indeed in Ethiopia, that means a lot, right? That means it's a big decision to move it to. Ethiopia is not a member of G20, but it means that it represents the global South in this case. So Indonesia should be there. Indonesia should act as one of the leaders for the global South. Again, do not bow to any, you know, any great power politics, so be it the US, be it the EU, be it the UK, Russia, China, all are great powers that have their own interests. We need to push forward our, or at least if not our own interests, the global South interests. And that is the Asia, Africa, South, Latin American interests, again, African interests, together with our Southeast Asian partners. Go there, bring that ideas, and put Indonesia into a bigger position. And I think Prabowo can do that, because that is what he's been targeting to do, right? Trying to be at the stage of world leader. And that is the stage for Indonesia. We already missed one for the Asia Africa Conference. Now we cannot miss the next one, which is the G20. And he will be there, I presume. And he would be, I think it would be best if you use that forum again to advance the principles of the global South and so on. Again, putting the solidarity of the global South into perspective there, and show it to the other great power that we can be one of the leaders. And that is one way that Indonesia can act as a middle power, as also a one of the leaders of the global south, but at the same time trying to balance between the West and the East by
Yeah.
not bowing down to both sides, right? So sometimes we conflate it with not saying anything, but we can criticize the West and also the East. That's also part of this balancing act, saying that oh you can be wrong here, you can be wrong as well at the other side. So this is one way to do it.
Right. Well, Indonesia is a big economy. Having Indonesia on either of their sides is a big win, if we can consider it so. And you're absolutely right there, Radityo, mentioning that the pivotal moment of the Asia-Africa Conference back in 1955, there was quite this big festivals and celebrations, commemorations of its 70th anniversary, but more can be done to sort of emphasize the importance of that pivotal moment in history and Indonesia's entity in the global South, for that matter. I'd like to go over to you, Professor Alexius Jamandu, because I'd like to highlight another interesting fact here that has been mentioned by our team on behalf of the Presidential Office of President Prabowo Subianto, mentioning that moments before our president departed for St. Petersburg, he received a phone call, or they were rather in a phone call with President Donald Trump of the US. And I'd like to bring up a few important facts that came up during the conversations. One was ways to elevate trade between Indonesia and US, and also for both nations and also Indonesia in this particular regard to contribute more to peace, not only regionally but also globally. Now, taking into account the crucial timing of this phone call just moments before his departure as an honorary guest at a Russian deliberation, what does it say, Professor, about in the US's way to sway Indonesia into their agenda and their propaganda, if we may say it so? Your thoughts?
Yeah, yeah. You see, Rahmat, these great powers, but United States and Russia, they realize that Indonesia's important role in the region for the stability of Southeast Asia. Indonesia is an informal leader of ASEAN, or as Mahbubani from Singapore mentioned in its book, is that Indonesia is the natural leader, natural guardian of ASEAN. So it's important for them to make sure that Indonesia is not going to, um, take side in the competition of these global powers.
Right.
Now, I think it's good also for Indonesia to navigate our foreign policy in such a way that we avoid risk. Yeah, we have a kind of risk management because we need both of them. We need China, we need United States, we also need Russia. So in order to be able to reach out to all these great powers, then we have to develop a creativity, yeah, of not taking the risk whenever we contact each one of them. Yeah, because we don't want to give the impression that Indonesia has abandoned its principle of independent and active foreign policy. Okay, and the second thing, which is also important for our foreign policy, is that let us avoid our strategic dependence on any of them. Yeah, especially in the strategic sectors of our economy. Not to have economic dependence on United States in terms of technology, in terms of energy, in terms of food. Yeah, let us avoid that because economic dependence in international relations is a strategic liability. Yeah, and other people may use you for their own advantage. So let's not avoid it, and let us take this as our principle, yeah, to develop our own capacity, to develop our own self-confidence, not to be the object of the play of these great powers. And that is the essence of our independent and active foreign policy. Not to be dependent on them. Because once you are dependent on them, they will use you as their own, object of the great power play in international relations. Now, that is the one thing that we need to um, pay attention to in our foreign policy because we want to reach out to all these great powers. You see, because we need of them in terms of economy, in terms of regional stability in Southeast Asia. We need their presence here. Yeah, because we don't want to have a hegemony by any of them. We don't want to have a power politics by any of them. Yeah, if you still remember important concept by our former foreign minister Martin Matalagawa,
Nalagawa, yeah.
dynamic equilibrium. That is the concept we want to introduce in our foreign policy.
Mm.
It is not the same with balance of power. Balance of power is the outcome of power politics, while dynamic equilibrium is based more on the recognition of the equality of all the sovereign nations in the world.
All right, thank you for that analysis, Professor. Raditya, I'd like to go over to you because, as mentioned a couple of times by our professor, that this is one of our ways to get closer to the global south and to sort of have a stronger presence of Indonesia within these regions and all of these countries that come along within this entity. How important, in your opinion and analysis, global south is to Indonesia?
I think it is very important. Again, one of the founding principles of Indonesia is international solidarity, this support for newly dependent states, especially in the 50s. And as you mentioned, the 1955, the Asia-Africa Conference.
Yeah.
Again, that is one of the uh, most historical moments of Indonesian foreign policy. It shows Indonesia's leadership, Indonesia's position in the world, and how Indonesia used it to push international norms, equal sovereignty. That sovereignty, especially territorial sovereignty, is for everyone, not only for great power but also for small powers. That is one of Indonesia's main principles in the foreign policy, right? And that is based on Indonesia's positions, Indonesian activity in the global south. Before it was you call it the Asia Africa, before the third world. Now it's the global south. The same logic that Indonesia should be active in uh, this kind of international solidarity, international activism, helping others. I think that's part of Indonesia's uh, principle, the most important principle of Indonesian foreign policy. So it is very important. Now the problem is, again, sorry to put it to problematize it, because the problem is now whether we really want that to be our where we want to push our activity there, because we do need to be more active in the global arena. Other countries needs Indonesia to be more active in any situations. And I think our presidents also know, or also has this vision, or at least interest, to be more active in the global arena. So this is where the debate is now whether we should be active in getting closer with bigger countries, getting closer with the elite. Again, G20, without going to Ethiopia, G20 is still the elite. club.
Yeah.
We enter it because we feel that it's the elite club, only 20 countries. Then it is the other, joining BRICS is another elite club, right? Joining OECD is another elite club.
Yeah.
There is another club which is not part of all that, which is the global south.
Yeah.
And I think Indonesia, even if we push the other direction, also we push the OECD, we push BRICS, we push the other, but we need to be able also to at least return to that root of solidarity, because those countries, our partners in Africa, in Latin America, in Southeast Asia, in South Asia, they need voices like Indonesia. The voiceless, before not many people, not many countries from the global south have the capacity or have the resources and the privilege to talk in a global forum. Indonesia now has it, the privilege, and I think we should use it. There is again, not to make it more moralistic, but there is a responsibility in our foreign policy. We are no longer a small country. We are at least a middle power. And if we follow what the president has been saying, we are not only a middle power, we want to be bigger. We want to be, I don't know whether you translate it into great power, the negara besar,
Yeah.
the so-called
Yeah.
big
A
countries.
great nation.
That
Yeah.
is a big, again, big nation, right?
Yeah.
That is a responsibility to go further than just becoming, a participant, a passive participant. We need to be more active. And that is, I think, now the challenge for Indonesia. And I believe, at least from what he said, from what his focus on foreign policy, I think President Prabowo can do that. Whether now the question is whether he can consistently do that for the next few years and push forward this idea of solidarity with the other global south countries.
And I cannot agree more on that. And I guess it's safe to say that everything is in line with the grand objective that President Prabowo Subianto has said many times and again throughout his campaign, his presidency, is that the fact that he wants to bring Indonesia on a global stage for a more prominent presence, and this is just one of the ways to do so. In the meantime, we're going to take another quick break while we wait for the final updates from the Palace of Constantine over in St. Petersburg, Russia, where currently right now President Prabowo Subianto alongside his entourage is an indoor diplomacy meeting with the presidents of Russian federations, Vladimir Putin alongside their entourage as our counterpart as well. We wait for the final moments for it to conclude and we'll bring you the press conference, official words from the top leaders. We'll be right back with the special report. Stay with us. Welcome back. Thank you so much for taking your time to stay with us on today's special reports here on TVR World, coming to you live from the capital Jakarta, Indonesia. I'm Rahmat Idris. We are in the second half of our program as we wait for the final visuals coming in from the Palace of Constantine over in St. Petersburg, Russia, where Indonesian President Prabowo Subianto and their entourage is currently within the closed meeting, a tete-a-tete meeting with the presidents of Russian federations and their entourage, President Vladimir Putin. We are waiting for the final moments and its conclusions to hear the significant outcomes and key takeaways from the meeting. And the bilateral and diplomatic meeting between President Prabowo Subianto and presidents of Russian federations, Vladimir Putin, is held and ongoing right now as we speak on the sidelines of the 28th St. Petersburg International Economic Forum 2025, which is scheduled to take place in St. Petersburg, Russia, from the 18th to the 21st of June 2025. It is a highly prestigious economic forum which always sees participations from hundreds of countries. Last year alone, it saw participations from 139 countries, over 21,000 delegates, and over 1,000 business deals were made. So we expect that great things will come out of the forum as well. And also, more importantly, with the presence of President of Indonesia, Prabowo Subianto, as the honorary invitee of the forum. And we are still joined by two esteemed guests for the conversations revolving around the topics of Indonesia's participations at the Economic Forum in Russia. Hopefully still with us from Universitas Pelita Harapan, Professor Alexius Jemadu of International Politics, and also from Universitas Erlangga, all the way joining us from Surabaya, East Java of Indonesia, Lecturer of International Relations, Radityo Dharma Putra. And there you are. Thank you very much, both of you gentlemen, for staying with me for these long hours of conversations while we wait for the conclusions and final words coming in from the two top leaders. First, I'd like to go to you again, Professor Alexius Jemadu. We've had the information from the palace again that within the entourage of President Prabowo Subianto, of course, we saw in the quick welcoming remarks earlier that we've seen there seated next to President Prabowo was the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Indonesia, Sugiono, but also with the entourage is the Defense Minister of Indonesia, Shafri Samsudin. Let's put this into perspective, Professor Jemadu. Are we buying more artillery or Russian weaponries and equipment this time around?
Yeah, I think so, and it indicates how Prabowo gives priority to the diversity of our military weapons, yeah, from many countries, not only United States, but also Russia, China, Turkey, and you see that it is for a good reason, because depending on just one of them would be too risky for us, because Prabowo himself knows very well if there is an embargo by any of these great power, we will be in trouble. Yeah. And that's why it's good that we go to different directions for our foreign policy and also our defense cooperation. And it will be very important for the future of our defense system. And I think Russia is going to play a very important role in defense cooperation with Indonesia. And that's why, our defense minister, Safri Samsudin, is also there with the president. And they have this cooperation. They have done it for so many years, and I believe it's going to increase in the future, and there will be more weapons that we buy from Russia this time.
Right. Mas Radityo, if you have any knowledge about this at all, walk us through some of the key moments in history of cooperation in defense between Indonesia and Russia, because this is something that I guess President Prabowo Subianto is very well versed. He was the Minister of Defense of Indonesia for one administration, so I believe, and he is also very aptly experienced in military back in his day. So I believe this is something that will become a point of interest of our cooperation, something that he'd bring forward to the table of today's tete-a-tete meeting.
Yeah, so military cooperation is one of the most important aspect of Indonesia-Russia relations, right? Back in the days of Soviet Union, I think it's basic knowledge for many Indonesians. Soviet Union back then helped Indonesia with military equipment when we were denied by the US. It was back in the 60s. But I think most importantly, if you look at the last few years, I think it was clear that Indonesia is increasing its relations with Russia in terms of military cooperation.
Yeah.
In terms of Navy, for example, we had Oruda joint exercise last year, and then the Ministry of Defense, Safri Samsudin, went to Moscow. Again, the Navy, there was this new ships coming for Indonesia, made in Italy, and then they will either stop supposedly next month in July, either in St. Petersburg or Vladivostok for the naval parade, the Russian naval parade. So there are increasing cooperations in terms of the military, yes, but it also brings, as Professor Alex just mentioned, because Prabowo decided to diversify our military equipments, not only from Russia, but also from others. Or there are rumors that Indonesia will start or rethinking of buying Sukhoi 35, for example, or even thinking of buying Chinese airplane, right? So there is but that will create a problems of coordinations with different manufacturers, different equipments, which is again internal technical discussion within the militaries. But it should be this way. I think more a military expert will probably can explain it better. But I think there is another risk of, yes, we need to balance between not depending on one country, but at the same time not diversifying, especially in terms of military, not diversifying that makes it so hard to communicate between equipments, especially with different airplanes from different countries. We're buying Rafale as well from France, right? There are different countries collaborating with Indonesia now. So that it is, I think it will be a way forward for Indonesia anyway. I think President Prabowo and Minister Safri already made that decision. And I think it's a sign that in the future, Indonesia will have uh, different military equipment from different countries. Again, I think just a couple of weeks ago, this decision to also buy, just last week, I think, from Turkey, this MOU with Turkey to buy new military equipment as well. So we need to also balance this with the technical capabilities, and that is a challenge for Indonesia. Defense is a very different from foreign policy in my views. Foreign policy, I agree that we need to be very flexible. Defense, flexible, but to some extent, because then there will be some technical issues. But for sure, for Russia and for Indonesia, I think, especially you look at the government, look at the elite, the history is always making uh, act as the sources of this good relations between Indonesia and Russia. And when we talk about history, we always go back to the first cooperation, military cooperation, when Soviet Union helped Indonesia. So I think that moment, if you look at just the new article by Philip Spermonte in Jakarta Post just today, he also said the same thing about this history of cooperation between Indonesia and Russia, especially in terms of the military. And I think it's it's one part of the Indonesia-Russia relations that we are going to develop further. But at the same time, again, because we are going to diversify, we need to keep the other partners as well there. Again, we decided that that's our path. We need to be consistent, and because we are going to diversify, there are other partners, and the challenge, as I mentioned, is to keep everything under control, keep everything in technical levels not creating problems within the military itself. I think that will be the challenge forward.
For Indonesia, okay. Professor Alex, but it goes without saying that it Russia is still embroiled with war in Ukraine, and it is a long and a protracted war ongoing until now, and it's getting even worse at some point in time. And is it wise for Indonesia to be involved in a military cooperation with a country that has been, in the past couple of years, regarded and earned sanctions from different parts of the globe? And what does it say about our decision, Professor?
I think it is our full right to make our own judgment, yeah. And I don't think it is really a big problem for us to build defense cooperation with Russia. Although Russia is, they still conduct this war with Ukraine. The cooperation should be conducted as usual. But at the same time, we need to emphasize the fact that having defense cooperation with Russia does not necessarily mean that we
support the war, essentially.
Yeah, support the war. That's not the idea. The idea is that we have to make a distinction between normal cooperation and also our good bilateral cooperation with Ukraine. So I don't think that it's really a big problem to continue our defense cooperation with Russia. But at the same time, we need to also remind the government that let's not sacrifice our commitment to implement our independent and active foreign policy, because Ukraine is also an important country as far as Indonesia is concerned. Yeah, and so far I believe that the Indonesian government has tried to create a balance between these two warring parties.
All right. Well, thank you for that analysis, Professor. Mas Radityo, on the heels of that analysis from Professor Alexius, I'd like to get your take as well on the fact that the protracting war of Russia and Ukraine right now, I mean, in the past couple of years alone, has severely impacted many sectors in our food security, for example, energy prices. And as we speak right now, all eyes are on Israel and Iran escalating conflicts, where up to this point, the sixth day now, trading missile strikes and explosions here and there, either in Tel Aviv or in Tehran, which has overshadowed everything else within airtime, if we may say. And at some point may also overshadow these very important gatherings of St. Petersburg's International Economic Forum. So give us your analysis as to how these top leaders, particularly we have our president there, we have Russia, will one way or another be putting all of these conflicts into account and into discussions, and one way or the other, it will affect all the business deals that are usually the main outcomes of an economic gathering.
Yeah, so I think it is very important to note that the war is still going on in Ukraine, so also in between Israel and Iran, Israel and Gaza. So there are conflict in the world that is still going on, even if we still need this economic forum to happen, for example.
Oh.
Having said that, I think there are several points. One point is that, yes, the Russia's war in Ukraine impacted our food security. I think that was very clear. Former President Jokowi focused on that aspect when he visited Kiev and Moscow before in 2022. But at the same time, that pushed us into, as Professor Alexis mentioned, that pushed us into diversifying our sources. We don't want to be dependent on one or two countries. So if you look at, for example, our need for wheat, which then becomes this, for example, for noodles and bread and so on. If you look at the data gathered by CSIS Indonesia, very interesting data that they gathered. It was before we depended on Ukraine and Russia. After, I think in 2023 and 24, we switched our dependence on wheat on other countries. So we now we are no longer dependent on one or two countries, or Russia, or Ukraine and Russia. Now we have different partners: Australia, Brazil, and other countries, and the numbers is lower. So it means diversifying in terms of food security, energy security as well. Diversifying is good, right? The same with fertilizer. We depended on Russia and Ukraine, especially Russia, for several components of making a fertilizer. And when the war happened in Ukraine, it created problems because then the price of fertilizer went up, the price of food went up, and so on. Now we're no longer dependent on Russia in that sense, which is good for Indonesian side. The problem with that is that we still dependent on China and some other places, but that's a very different situation and different solution as well. But what I meant is that war and conflict affects everyone in the world, right? And when President Prabowo and President Putin talk, I don't know whether they will talk about Ukraine. Again, it has been very sensitive situation before as well, when then Minister of Defense Prabowo proposed this peace proposal back in Shangri-La Dialogue in 2023, created a lot of debates and so on. So I don't know whether President Prabowo will talk about it. But there are other things that they can talk about, right? One example is Iran and Israel, also Gaza. If that is what Indonesia wants to focus to push peace in the world, then that probably is one area where we can talk with Russia, see what they think about it, what they can do about it, what they can contribute to it. One other thing would be this relations between great powers. Any tension in the relations between great powers affects everyone. That's the problem. Everything that President of the US, Donald Trump, did affects everyone. Whatever he said affects other countries. I think that will be also one of the things that were discussed, or probably will be discussed by President Prabowo and President Putin. What happened now in the world? But my last point would be, again, Indonesia should look at its own perception and its own interests in this case. Russia might be able to help Indonesia fulfill some of those interests. And if that's the case, there is, as Professor Jamadu, I agree, if we can fulfill our defense needs from Russia, then do it. But remember that there are other partners that probably can do it better as well. So the calculation would be very important. And what matters is Indonesia's interest. If this is about calculation, cost-benefit calculation of which one is cheaper, which one, then do it and choose the best offer for Indonesia. There are other partners, and Indonesia is big enough that other countries wants to partner Indonesia. Just a couple of weeks ago, President Macron visited Jakarta and visited Indonesia. There are other partners that look at Indonesia and wants to be a close partner with Indonesia. So use that position. Sometimes as again, I agree with Professor Alex just before. We don't use that privilege. We don't use that position often enough. Sometimes we just okay. We were invited to some let's say G7 BRICS and then the SPF, yes, but use it for our own advantage. Don't use it for other people's advantage. Use it first for us. And what we need now probably is what President Prabowo needs to think. Again, defense cooperation is one thing, but I think what part of the calculation, so this is my additional point, what part of the calculation must be that whatever we do, we cannot avoid to offend anyone. Or to put it into better terms, whatever we do, we will offend someone. We will make someone think that, oh, we went to Russia, someone will think that, oh, Indonesia is moving closer to Russia. We went to France, for example. President Prabowo went somewhere to the UK. Someone will say, "Oh, now Indonesia is closer to the West." So there is always something that we cannot control, which is other countries' perception about us. What we can control is what we want, what we need as a country. That's it. That's it.
Well, we certainly can drive international narrative on this, and as you said it very well there, whatever diplomacy steps that we take, there is always repercussions, there is always a different perspective and a certain spin of a more ideal way of going about it. In the meantime, we are going to take another quick break, Professor and also Ms. Radityo, as we wait for final moments and the conclusions from the Palace of Constantine in St. Petersburg. Well, it's been over an hour now, but we expect moments from now, the tete-a-tete meeting between President Prabowo Subianto and President Vladimir Putin will come to an end, hopefully soon, and with the most significant part of it is the unveiling of the results of the agreements to the world. We wait for those moments to arrive, hopefully sooner than later, right here on a special report. Stay with us. Hello there. After that extensive break, you are now back to our special report here on TVR World. For the past couple of hours, we have been shining a light on the currently ongoing 28th St. Petersburg International Economic Forum 2025. The President of Indonesia, Prabowo Subianto, is right now in St. Petersburg in attendance, and currently he's in a closed-door meeting with presidents of Russian Federation's Vladimir Putin. We are awaiting results of that very meeting. And as we welcome you back to our program today, let's move into other reports that we have put together relating to the state visit of President Prabowo Subianto to St. Petersburg. He arrived in St. Petersburg, Russia, and was received a warm welcome from the Russian government and Indonesian diaspora. The agenda of the state visit includes meeting Russian President Vladimir Putin. Indonesian President Prabowo Subianto arrived at Pulkovo International Airport in St. Petersburg, Russia on Wednesday. President Prabowo visited Russia at the official invitation from Russian President Vladimir Putin. Prabowo was welcomed by Russian Deputy Prime Minister Denis Manturov, Russian Deputy of Protocol Alexander Prusov, and Indonesian Foreign Affairs Minister Sugiono. The welcome procession included the singing of national anthems of both countries and defile of troops. The state visit agenda includes a bilateral meeting with President Putin discussing the cooperations on defense and strategy and signing a number of strategic memorandum of understanding. And also, a group of Indonesian diaspora, including Indonesian students in Russia, welcomed the arrival of President Prabowo Subianto in St. Petersburg, Russia on Wednesday night. The Indonesians who reside in St. Petersburg filled the terrace of the hotel where the president is staying in the city center, wearing Indonesia's traditional attires. Well, all eyes are on St. Petersburg in Russia this week as the northern capital hosts the nation's Showcase Economic Forum. The annual event kicked off today with tens of thousands of people from across the globe attending. Russia Today's artist correspondent Che Bose has more on this.
It's a remarkable event, and the energy here is incredible, very positive, and it's kind of marked out by the scale of the event. It's absolutely huge, and we've got people from over 140 countries here, 20,000 delegates, tens of thousands of people who don't seem to have got the memo about Russia being isolated. Countries from across the global south, people from Europe, from the United States, and they're here to talk about cooperation, not isolation. And it all comes, of course, as sanctions are ramped up on Russia. But at the center of this feeling and this energy here in St. Petersburg is all about how Russia can cooperate with the partners who have stuck with it throughout its difficult couple of years and continue to grow the Russian economy. So there's also about 150 different sessions, different mini conferences within the conference, talking about politics, talking about cooperation, development of new technologies, finance. It is the economic forum after all, and this is a very, very central point around which this whole movement, if you like, is revolving. In addition to that, of course, there's a political element here. President Putin will meet with the Indonesian leader. Indonesia, of course, having just joined BRICS, become a central part of the BRICS family, if you like. All in all, here in St. Petersburg, there's a sense of positivity. There's a sense that we can get things done, that working with Russia's partners, and this family feeling, it's BRICS, but it's also about how to counter the idea of isolationism, where it's really the West that's isolating itself from Russia, not the other way around. Russia's open for business, and this incredible forum is testament to that.
Well, President Prabowo Subianto of Indonesia is scheduled to deliver the speech as a keynote speaker at St. Petersburg International Economic Forum, or SPIEF 2025, in Russia on Friday, June the 20th, and that is tomorrow. Prabowo's presence is thought to showcase global recognition to Indonesia and Indonesia's strategic role at global stage. Farah Putri Nahlia, a member of Commission 1 of the House of Representatives, said on Thursday, President Prabowo's presence at SPIEF 2025 reflects Indonesia's reputation as a country with political stability and promising economic prospects. She said Indonesia should capitalize on this golden opportunity to strengthen Indonesia's position in investment, trade, and multilateral diplomacy. Sarah added that Prabowo's visit to Russia on June the 19th to the 20th is not merely an ordinary diplomatic visit. Rather, it is a concrete act of Indonesia's active diplomacy in responding to a more complex global dynamics. SPIEF is one of the most prestigious international economic forums, attended by tens of thousands of delegates from hundreds of countries. Last year, this forum produced more than 1,000 agreements with a value of reaching trillions of rupiah. President of Russia Vladimir Putin said Indonesia will continue moving as a country with a strong economy and standing on a position that is increasingly recognized worldwide. Speaking in St. Petersburg, Russia on Thursday early morning local time, Russian President Vladimir Putin said Indonesia would become a strong economy in the future with a presence stronger at global level. Putin highlighted Indonesia's population, which currently reached 280 million, and a global radical change among developing countries. The change was seen in their economic growth, including Indonesia, as well as their quality of education. According to Putin, these developing economies were working hard to improve the welfare of the people through developments in economy, science, and education. Putin also mentioned the good relationship between Russia and Indonesia, which was based on trust in the past few decades. The Russian president said he would ensure Russia's commitment to maintaining and expanding cooperations with Indonesia in various areas. And we almost come to the end of our program today, and I would like to greet again our guest of the program, and I'd like to express my gratitude to Professor of International Politics of Universitas Pelita Harapan Jakarta, Professor Alexius Jamadu, who joined us for the last 3 hours in the program and had to leave already. Thank you very much, Professor. I hope you can hear this. And still with us for the final part of our program today, Lecturer of International Relations of Universitas Erlangga, joining us from Surabaya, Mas Radityo Dharma Putra. Mas Radityo, we have been informed that, and the decision has been made, that we have received no words whatsoever from St. Petersburg as to when the conclusion of the tete-a-tete meeting will take place, and we can only stretch this program as far as we can. So I guess we'll put the highlights and the outcomes of that particular closed-door meeting at our future program site here on TV Our World. But of course, before we conclude our program for the special report today, I'd like to get your final take, just to sort of bookend our discussions in the past 3 hours pertaining to 75 years of bilateral relations, diplomacy between Indonesia and Russia, and the participations of our presidents at the prestigious SPF 2025. Put it all together into perspective for us.
Yes, so for me, I think, as I mentioned from the very beginning, what is important is Indonesia's national interests, right? And in every partnership, especially now with Russia, because we are focusing on the 75th anniversary of the bilateral relations, we need to focus on what we can get from this relationship, what we can develop for our country. And I think putting that into perspective, this visits by President Prabowo to Russia to meet with Vladimir Putin, to meet with President Putin, to give keynote speech at the St. Petersburg Economic Forum should be considered from that perspective, should be focused on what Indonesia can get. Because at the moment, we are also risking our reputations. Again, as has been said before, there are other reasons why we didn't go to the G7 meeting, but the reputation and the image of Indonesia will be put into questions. To counter that narrative, to counter that position, I think President Prabowo and the cabinet needs to show that we can get something, especially since it's been put up that St. Petersburg Economic Forum always brings a lot of audience, a lot of businessmen, a lot of politicians from other countries. So this is a chance for Indonesia to get something, to use its membership, to use its privilege in BRICS, to use its newly membership in BRICS, to use its position and its recognitions by other countries that Indonesia is important, and use it for Indonesia's national interests and our development, our economic growth, our domestic development as well. So instead of looking at it from a geopolitical perspective, which would be very sensitive and would be very, divisive because there are different dynamics at play, I think we should just look at it from what we can get. As long as we can get something from the visit, as long as President Prabowo returned from the visit, show that we, Indonesia, get investment. We get partnership with Russia in this area, in this sector. We have defense, MOU, cooperation, buying these airplanes and so on. Then we can safely say that the visit achieved its goals. Otherwise, there will be a lot of questions, a lot of discussion, a lot of debates within Indonesian society and abroad, because other countries will look at Indonesia and see what are you doing. Because again, to reiterate, Indonesia is the only countries with the head of state coming to St. Petersburg this year. The other, China is represented by, I think, vice premier, which is lower ranked than before. I think Bahrain also arrived with one of the elites, but not the head of state, head of the government. So we need to be sure that we can gain something. But gaining something doesn't only mean that we gain economic benefit, right?
Yeah.
Gaining something could also be gaining recognitions, gaining new partners. I think Professor Alexius, who just left us here, said or presented his idea that Indonesia needs to get more partners. And this is a chance for President Prabowo, for Indonesia, as a senior partner there in the forum, giving a keynote as an honorary guest to showcase Indonesia's development, his vision for Indonesia, and attract people and partners from other countries, not only from Russia, but from other countries who visited and who attended the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum. So I think if that is achieved, that is already considered, that could already be considered a success, despite the discussion leaving, again, not attending G7 and something else, but still we gain something from this. I think that is very important to note. And this will be beneficial for Indonesia's future relations with Russia, because we know that Russia needs us. We need Russia as well. So we can position ourselves in a better place. We can get more from Russia. We can develop cooperation further without putting aside our partnership with other countries.
Yeah.
So we need to be able to go deeper in our cooperation because it is in our interest with Russia, but at the same time, keeping our relations with other partners because we need to be able to read the geopolitical mood in the world right now. It is a fact that the war in Ukraine is still going on, that discussions among other countries about giving more sanctions to Russia and so on is still there. So we need to be able to look at it and proceed delicately, not to offend other countries, not to provoke other countries, but to get our own interest. With that, I think the path forward is clear. Develop the relationship, diversify the relationship with others as well, and keep the relations, keep the balance right, so we can stay outside of the main conflict and main division in the world.
All right. Very well said there. Well, Indonesia's national interest is of the utmost importance, first and foremost, above everything else. Thank you very much for summarizing it all for us together. Joining us all the way from Surabaya is Java of Indonesia, lecturer of international relations of Universitas Erlangga, Radityo Dharma Putra. Mas Radit, thank you very much for essentially allowing me to pick your brains nearly in the last 3 hours. I earned 2 class credits, I suppose. Thank you so much. Spasiba.
It's always my pleasure, Mas Rahmat.
We hope to join you again next time. And that
Yes.
also concludes
Yes.
our special reports here, coming to you from Jakarta, Indonesia, on participations and attendance of President Prabowo Subianto in St. Petersburg for the International Economic Forum 2025. I'm Rahmat Idris. Thank you so much for watching. Bye-bye.